Welcome back to our channel. Top 5 Most Valuable 1-Cent Pennies Ever Made. You might be sitting on a hidden fortune. Like and subscribe now. In 1961, the United States stood on the brink of transformation. John F. Kennedy had just stepped into the Oval Office, the space race was intensifying, and civil movements were beginning to shape the nation's conscience. Amid this backdrop of sweeping national momentum, the familiar hum of coin presses echoed steadily through the United States Mint, particularly at the Philadelphia and Denver facilities. The Lincoln cent, already in circulation for over half a century, continued its quiet journey into the pockets and drawers of everyday Americans. The wheatback design had been replaced just 2 years earlier, in 1959, by the Lincoln Memorial Reverse, a modern touch paying tribute to the 16th president's enduring legacy. In 1961, over 1 billion such pennies would be minted, each bearing the new reverse, the same solemn profile of Lincoln on the obverse, and a promise of uniformity. But uniformity is never absolute. Among the billions of 1961 pennies struck, a few were destined to be different. Not by design or intention, but by the unpredictable consequences of pressure, metal, and machine. These pennies, indistinguishable at a glance, held secrets that only a sharp eye or a persistent mind could uncover. Decades later, in a dimly lit coin shop tucked inside a side street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a retired postal worker named Elwood Carmichael shuffled through a tray of circulated Lincoln cents. His interest in coins had been a quiet companion throughout his life, a hobby born in childhood, sustained through years of service, and now filling the peaceful days of retirement. Elwood wasn't searching for anything in particular that day. He was killing time, scanning for mint marks or the occasional double die. But one penny caught his attention. It had a date that read 1961, but the numerals looked slightly thicker, almost swollen in appearance. He tilted the coin beneath a desk lamp, and that's when he noticed the doubling. The "In God We Trust" inscription across the top of Lincoln's head seemed to have shadows trailing each letter. The "Liberty" inscription along the left edge showed similar distortion. And most striking of all was the date. Each digit, especially the 9 and 6, seemed to echo, like the imprint of a second, slightly misaligned strike. It wasn't the blurring of wear or the effect of grime. It was a true visual doubling, crisp and undeniable. Elwood set the coin aside, his pulse ticking upward. He'd read about double die obverse, coins struck with dies that had been improperly prepared during the hubbing process, leading to duplicated images on the final coin. Such errors, though rare, were among the most coveted in numismatics. But to see one on a 1961 cent? That was unexpected. He returned the next day to the same coin shop and asked if he could look through the rest of the 1961 cents from the tray. The shop owner obliged. Elwood didn't find another like it, and he knew then that what he had wasn't a common variety, it might be singular. He sent the penny to a leading grading service, nervous and skeptical but hopeful. Weeks passed. When the coin returned, it bore a label that confirmed his suspicions: 1961 1-cent double die obverse, strong class V doubling, 58 Australian dollars. Elwood was stunned. Not only had the doubling been authenticated, but the coin had received one of the highest known grades for this error type. Its surfaces were mostly clean, with only minor handling marks and no corrosion. It had somehow survived over 60 years in near pristine condition, despite likely passing through dozens of hands before landing in his .as. Word of the fine spread, coin collectors and error specialists began taking notice. The doubling on Elwood's coin was more dramatic than most other minor double dies catalogued from that year. The second impressions of the letters and numbers were strong, separated by clear space rather than the slight smudging often seen with mechanical doubling. Experts determined that the doubling likely occurred during the die creation process, a misalignment during the die hubbing stage, when the design is pressed into the steel die under tremendous pressure. Adding to the mystery was a faint but discernible anomaly on the reverse. The columns of the Lincoln Memorial were slightly offset, with the base appearing to have a shallow shelf where the metal flow didn't completely fill the design. It wasn't a second error, but it hinted at stress during the strike, possibly linked to the worn or misaligned die. All signs pointed to a unique moment of imperfection at the mint, where conditions aligned to produce something far beyond routine. As collectors became aware of Elwood's discovery, offers came swiftly. An early bid of $5,000 was easy to decline. Then came $15,000 from a dealer hoping to corner the error coin market. Another buyer from California, known for acquiring exceptional Lincoln cents, offered $32,000 and asked to fly in for a private appraisal. Elwood, increasingly overwhelmed, sought counsel from numismatic organizations, who urged him to wait for formal auctions to maximize its value. In the months that followed, images of the 1961 double-die penny appeared in trade magazines and error coin registries. Its features were studied in forums and discussed in podcasts. Several individuals began combing through their own 1961 change, hoping lightning might strike twice. A few minor double dies were located, light traces near the date or Liberty, but none with the clarity, strength, or grade of Elwood's find. Then came a twist that pushed the story further into numismatic folklore. A former Mint employee, now retired and living in Pennsylvania, reached out anonymously to confirm that in early 1961, there had been a hubbing error with a batch of Lincoln cent dies at the Philadelphia Mint. He remembered the issue because it delayed production by a week and led to a limited number of error dies being briefly used before being caught and scrapped. According to his memory, only a handful of cents made it into circulation before the problem was detected. While not official confirmation, the statement lent weight to the theory that Elwood's coin was one of perhaps a dozen, or fewer, that escaped destruction. The demand for the coin surged. It was eventually consigned to an elite auction in New York, where bidding started high and escalated quickly. A private collector in Texas pushed the winning bid well past expectations. When the gavel finally dropped, Elwood's 1961 double-die penny sold for an astonishing $94,000. He had walked into a coin shop on a quiet afternoon and walked out with a piece of history in his pocket. In the years since, that coin has become a cornerstone example of what makes error collecting so compelling, not just the rarity or monetary value, but the thrill of discovery, the connection to history, and the reminder that even a humble cent can hold the power to astonish. Today, based on market fluctuations and the coin's growing fame, the estimated value of a confirmed, high-grade 1961 double-die Lincoln cent ranges between $56,000 and $112,800. It remains one of the most talked-about anomalies of its era, a vivid testament to the idea that treasure doesn't always glitter. It can be copper-toned, easily overlooked, and quietly revolutionary. In 1982, change swept through the United States, not only in society and politics but also in something as ordinary as the 1-cent coin. Inflation had crept higher year by year, and copper prices climbed with it, pressing the U.S. Mint into a pivotal decision. That year, without a public announcement, fanfare, or dramatic headlines, the Lincoln cent quietly underwent one of the most significant transitions in its modern history. What had been a coin made of 95% copper and 5% zinc for decades would now be minted primarily from zinc with only a thin copper plating. The shift was economic, pragmatic, necessary. But as is often the case when precision meets urgency, anomalies crept in. The Philadelphia and Denver mints continued their operations with staggering intensity. To meet production demands and reduce costs, they struck over 10 billion pennies that year. What made 1982 particularly unusual wasn't just the metal change, it was that both compositions were used simultaneously. Copper cents and zinc cents were struck at overlapping intervals, and multiple varieties were created, large date and small date designs for both metal types, with and without mint marks. The result was a numismatic maze, a year full of subtle differences that could mean little, or everything. Years passed. Pennies from 1982 continued their quiet journey through cash registers, car cup holders, and forgotten piggy banks. And then, quietly, in a modest town in northern Ohio, a coin collector named Darren Hill found himself elbow-deep in a 5-gallon bucket of Lincoln cents. Darren wasn't a professional. He didn't own grading equipment or high-end magnifiers. He just loved the challenge of discovery. He had read about the complexities of 1982 cents and decided to search for the rarest combinations. Late one evening, after sorting through hundreds of coins, Darren found a penny that felt off. It had no mint mark, struck in Philadelphia, but the date, a 1982 small date, stood out. He weighed it. The copper cents from earlier in the year should weigh 3.11 grams. Zinc cents, the new standard, were lighter at 2.5 grams. His scale read 3.11. He weighed it again, same result. It was a small date Philadelphia penny, struck in copper. According to records, that combination wasn't supposed to exist. Only the large date versions were officially confirmed to be struck on copper planchets from the Philadelphia Mint. If Darren's scale was right, he might have uncovered one of the rarest variations of the year. Darren didn't celebrate. He wasn't convinced. He set the coin aside and resumed sorting. But over the next few days, he returned to it again and again. The more he examined it, the more the doubt began to fade. The coin's date was indeed small. The 2 curled tighter, the 8 appeared narrower, the spacing was right. And the weight remained consistent. After sending the coin to a respected grading company, he waited in silence for nearly a month. When the package returned, it carried an unexpected confirmation: 1982 1-cent small date, copper planchet, MS-64. The excitement was immediate. Forums buzzed. Collectors referenced old guides and realized that only a tiny number of 1982 small date copper cents from Philadelphia had ever surfaced. Darren's coin joined a microclub of confirmed examples, fewer than 24 known at the time. The transition year had created a narrow window, a moment when older copper planchets may have been mistakenly used for newer small date dies at the Philadelphia Mint. It wasn't just a one-year type error, it was a hybrid of date style and composition that by all rules should not have been possible. Suddenly, the coin took on a life beyond its face value. Offers rolled in, from serious collectors and dealers alike. Some were cautious, citing market volatility. Others understood its scarcity and pushed numbers upward. One museum curator even asked about loaning it for display beside other U.S. Mint transitional errors. But Darren, now aware of the coin's unique position in numismatic history, was in no rush to part with it. Soon, a twist in the story added a new layer. A retired Philadelphia Mint employee, speaking at a numismatic convention, mentioned that during the first half of 1982, the Mint had stockpiled leftover copper planchets while transitioning to zinc. Due to a temporary delay in zinc blank shipments, some of those copper planchets were pressed into service unexpectedly to keep up production. According to his memory, a miscommunication between departments caused a brief mix of small date dies and copper blanks, resulting in a handful of coins like Darren's being struck and released. There was no official count. No log. Just a whisper of possibility that made the discovery even more valuable. Collectors began combing their change jars. Coin roll hunters focused entire searches on 1982 pennies, learning to distinguish between small and large dates with magnifying glasses and digital scales. A few more examples were found, but none with Darren's mint condition and sharp features. His coin had survived without corrosion, spots, or heavy wear, allowing it to stand apart even among its own kind. At auction, under the warm spotlight and among whispers of anticipation, the coin commanded attention. Bidding was intense. A West Coast investor, known for collecting minting transition errors, locked horns with an East Coast institution looking to complete their 20th century U.S. coin error set. The price escalated. When the final bid was accepted, the audience erupted, not with applause, but with quiet awe. The sale price was just shy of 6 figures. Today, Darren's 1982 small date copper penny is regarded as one of the rarest modern errors from the Lincoln Cent series. Its allure stems not just from its physical form, but from the narrow sliver of time that allowed it to exist, a fleeting overlap between two compositions, two styles, and one critical year. As of now, the estimated value of a confirmed 1982 small date Philadelphia copper penny in high-grade condition ranges from $48,000 to $118,000. A humble coin, born of transition, forged in error, and treasured for its extraordinary defiance of expectation. In 1999, the world stood at the edge of a new millennium. There was excitement, uncertainty, and a digital revolution humming in the background. As the United States geared up for Y2K preparedness and technological advancement, the U.S. Mint continued its unbroken rhythm, pressing coins that, at first glance, seemed no different than those of previous years. The Lincoln Cent remained steadfast, unchanged in design since 1959, with Lincoln's enduring profile on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. But behind the scenes of this ordinary production year, something subtle and unexpected unfolded, something that would be noticed not in the moment, but years later, by a collector who understood that imperfection often hides in plain sight. In 1999, over 5 billion 1-cent coins were minted. They were struck in massive numbers at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints. Made of zinc coated in a thin copper shell, the coins were lightweight, efficient, and economical. With the Lincoln Memorial design nearing the end of its tenure, it would be replaced 10 years later. These cents were supposed to be routine. But routine is where anomalies hide best. Over a decade after its release, a retired Army technician named Martin Rangel found himself revisiting his old childhood coin collection in his basement in Kansas. His fingers were weathered from years of work, and his eyes were not as sharp as they once were, but his instincts were still tuned to small things, minute differences, quiet irregularities. He had no intention of finding anything remarkable that afternoon. He simply wanted to relive the comfort of familiar copper coins. As he sorted through a plastic container filled with Lincoln cents from various decades, Martin noticed a 1999 penny that looked wrong. The lettering across the top, "In God We Trust," appeared slightly blurry. Not worn, but doubled. He tilted the coin beneath the flickering light overhead. The date, 1999, showed a similar effect, with the 9's echoing faintly just to their sides. He reached for a loop and leaned in. The word "Liberty" also displayed the anomaly. Each letter seemed traced, as if shadowed by a second impression. It wasn't the random appearance of a damaged coin. This was crisp, defined, and symmetrical. Martin had read enough over the years to suspect what he might have in hand, a double-die penny. But 1999 wasn't a year known for dramatic double dies. Still, the clues were too sharp to ignore. He contacted a grading service and mailed in the coin, unsure if it would come back as anything more than a curiosity. Weeks passed. When the package returned, the label stunned him. 1999 1-cent double-die obverse, MS65 read. Not only had the doubling been confirmed, but the coin's color and condition were exceptional. In fact, the sharpness and brilliance of the strike placed it among the finest known examples. Word spread quickly in the collecting community. Unlike the widely recognized 1955 or 1972 double-die cents, the 1999 variation hadn't made headlines, or so it seemed. But numismatists began to take notice. Discussions erupted in online forums and coin clubs. The doubling on Martin's coin was clearer and more dramatic than what had been catalogued from that year. While minor doubling had been reported before, nothing of this magnitude had surfaced in such pristine condition. Experts examined its characteristics. The doubling was a true hub doubling, a result of a misalignment during the die creation process, not a mechanical mishap or die fatigue. The spread on the letters was wide, and the date was struck cleanly with noticeable separation between the impressions. This wasn't just a fluke, it was an error born from a brief lapse in die alignment, during a year when such errors were thought to be under tight control. The most curious aspect came later. A former mint production technician, who had worked in Philadelphia in the late 90s, spoke anonymously about a brief period of mechanical failure during a series of die hubbings. According to his recollection, 2 sets of obverse dies were pulled after producing questionable impressions, but before they could be destroyed, at least one was mistakenly installed into a working press. That press produced a batch of pennies before being swapped out the following week. Though the exact number of affected coins was unknown, it was likely fewer than several thousand, most of which would have entered circulation unnoticed. Martin's coin, by some twist of fate, had survived the chaos of change, commerce, and time in flawless shape. As more collectors became aware of its existence, the hunt began. Others found faint examples, though none matched the clarity or grade of Martin's discovery. The coin's legend began to grow. Soon, he received an invitation to present the coin at a regional numismatic expo in Chicago. There, under the glow of display cases and the scrutiny of veteran collectors, his penny drew continuous crowds. Offers came in waves: $15,000, $28,000, then $39,000. Each time, Martin politely declined. He wasn't sure what the future would hold for the coin, but he knew it was something special, something worth more than just a quick sale. The story didn't end there. A university researcher specializing in U.S. mint production anomalies studied the coin and confirmed that its doubling matched a theoretical pattern he had modeled years earlier. According to his research, the type of doubling seen on the 1999 penny would have required two hubbing misalignments during a very narrow window of die preparation. The probability was remarkably low, so low that the coin's mere existence helped validate his earlier theories on hubbing irregularities. That rare alignment of time, machinery, and oversight had produced not just a collector's item, but a moment of validation in the broader study of minting technology. Martin's coin was not just an accident, it was a physical record of a unique imperfection in a system built for precision. Today, the coin is held in a private collection, traded quietly between collectors who appreciate its place in numismatic history. Its value, shaped by its rarity, condition, and the story behind it, continues to rise. For those who chase the thrill of discovery in pocket change or inherited jars, it stands as proof that the rarest finds often come from the most ordinary places. As of now, the estimated value of a confirmed 1999 double-die obverse Lincoln penny in high mint state condition ranges between $40,000 and $106,000. A simple cent, struck with unintentional beauty, and carried through time as a silent masterpiece of error. In 2006, the Lincoln cent continued its long and uninterrupted legacy, bearing the same dignified profile of Abraham Lincoln that had graced the obverse since 1909. The reverse still showed the familiar Lincoln Memorial, a design in use since 1959, quietly enduring decade after decade of political and technological change. By then, the coin had become so commonplace it was often overlooked, dismissed as trivial, something barely noticed as it passed from hand to hand. Yet, in the margins of the ordinary, mistakes sometimes happened, mistakes so rare and subtle that they remained hidden for years, buried in change jars and coin rolls until the right eyes uncovered them. In the early spring of 2021, a retired machinist named Ray Ellison, living in Arizona, resumed a hobby he had set aside decades earlier. He had been a coin enthusiast in his youth, fascinated by how imperfections in production could make one coin worth hundreds, sometimes thousands, more than another. When his granddaughter brought him a small box of pennies from a local garage sale, he saw it as nothing more than a fun afternoon project. The box was dusty, the coins dull with age, and most of them no different than what you'd expect to find in any jar on any kitchen counter. Ray sorted patiently, year by year, grouping the coins and checking for anomalies out of habit. When he reached the stack of 2006 pennies, he paused. There was one coin that looked peculiar, not at first glance, but under closer scrutiny. The word "Liberty" appeared almost doubled, and the date, 2006, seemed to have a slight ghosting effect, especially around the zeros and the 6. The "In God We Trust" motto followed the same strange pattern. It was as if the letters had been struck more than once, but slightly askew. He brought out his old magnifier, the same one he had used as a teenager, and studied the coin carefully. What he was seeing didn't look like post-mint damage. It wasn't from circulation wear or pressure. It looked like a double die. But 2006 wasn't a year collectors associated with double die errors. Still, Ray had a feeling, a persistent instinct born from years of watching machines, knowing how even the smallest misalignment could create something entirely unintended. He weighed the coin, and it matched the expected standard for post-1982 cents, 2.5 grams, zinc core, copper-plated. Nothing about the composition suggested anything out of place. But the visual doubling remained undeniable. He placed the coin in a protective sleeve and decided to send it off to a professional grading service. His wife teased him about making a fuss over a penny, but Ray didn't mind. He wasn't looking for gold, he was looking for answers. When the coin returned, the grading results exceeded his expectations. The label read, 2006 1-cent double die obverse, MS66 red. The doubling had been confirmed by the professionals, and the coin's rich, vibrant color and sharp strike elevated it to one of the finest known examples. More importantly, the error wasn't previously catalogued as part of the mainstream double die listings for that year. News of the coin's discovery traveled quickly among collectors. It spurred renewed interest in the 2006 series, as others began revisiting their own collections. Several examples surfaced, but none with the clarity, condition, or strength of doubling found on Ray's coin. A small community of numismatists began comparing notes, theorizing that a limited batch of 2006 Lincoln cents from the Philadelphia Mint had been struck with a misaligned die, a misalignment during the hubbing process that produced true doubling on the coin's devices, particularly noticeable in the inscriptions and the date. What made the story even more compelling was a quiet reference in a Mint production report from 2006. A footnote detailed a short-term issue with a die-setting press at the Philadelphia facility that had briefly gone out of calibration before being corrected and replaced. No coins were reported as having been removed or destroyed. It's likely, as several experts noted, that during those few hours, a number of double die coins were struck and sent into circulation unnoticed. For Ray, the coin was no longer just a copper-plated zinc disc. It was a one-in-a-million mistake that had traveled 15 years through the hands of countless people before resting in his garage sale box. Offers came, some casual, some serious. A New York dealer offered $17,000 outright, but Ray declined. He wasn't rushing. He wanted to understand what he had. The rarity, the condition, the circumstances, it all pointed to something more than a curiosity. It pointed to a coin that didn't just survive time, but stood outside of it. Soon after, the coin was displayed at a regional numismatic convention, where veteran collectors examined it under lights and magnifiers. One senior numismatist called it one of the cleanest modern double die obverse strikes in recent memory, while another remarked that this coin rewrites the story for 2006. The consensus was clear: Ray's coin was not just rare, it was redefining. Within months, several grading services had added the 2006 double die obverse to their official listings, citing Ray's example as the standard. Only a handful of others were submitted and confirmed, but none surpassed his coin in condition or clarity. Collectors began to scour 2006 rolls, hoping to find even a whisper of the same doubling. A few did, but most came up empty. Then came a twist that few expected. A researcher studying die production methods at the Mint revealed that during 2006, the U.S. Mint had tested a new die hardening process designed to reduce maintenance costs. For a brief period, the method affected how dies were seated during hubbing. It was a short-lived experiment and not widely publicized, but the researcher believed that this change may have contributed to the exact kind of doubling seen on Ray's coin. A test process, a machine glitch, and a tight production schedule had converged to create a coin that was both an accident and a perfect representation of a moment in minting history. The coin now rests in a secure private collection, occasionally displayed at select exhibitions and referenced in modern Lincoln cent guidebooks as one of the rarest confirmed errors of its year. What began as a humble penny in a forgotten box became a cornerstone of modern numismatic discovery. As of today, the estimated value of a 2006 Lincoln cent with a verified double die obverse in high mint state condition ranges from $32,000 to $90,000. A simple cent, forged in the ordinary, made extraordinary by a moment of mechanical imperfection and the patient eye of a collector who believed in the hidden value of small things.